Hey everyone, so it is currently very late in the day on October 8th. I'm starting this vlog a lot later in the month than I had originally intended to because it's been a very crazy couple of weeks for me. But today I am officially starting this video for the next episode in my Finish Your DNF series that is going to be going over the Countess of Harleigh mysteries, with the first book being A Lady's Guide to Etiquette and Murder by Diane Freeman. This is a series that was recommended to me by my friend Jen at Genderqueer, and this is a cozy mystery, kind of has a romantic subplot kind of story, I think. And it's a 5-book series. The books are very short. They're all under 300 pages, which is very nice. Thank you, Jen, for that. And this is a story where, in this one in particular, we follow our main character who's named Frances. And Frances had lost her husband. He had had a heart attack and died a year prior. This picks up basically a year to the day after his passing, and she's decided to move house with her family. And an inspector comes to her home and says that they're kind of tying up loose ends with the case. They are starting to think, though, that it's possible that her husband had been murdered. And the only 3 people that know about the death of her husband are Frances herself, because of the fact that the second person involved is her husband's lover that apparently he died in the bed of, and the third person being a person they had to pull in to help move the body at one point after he died, which is now her neighbor. And his name is George, and he actually is the brother to Frances's best friend. So there's obviously a lot of things going on with that. But I guess what the crux of the story of this book at least is I think they're going to try to figure out what really did happen to Frances's husband, because I do believe that they're pretty much just trying to figure out what happened, because it seems like he might have been possibly murdered. But at the same time, what I just learned is that while all this is happening, Frances has a younger sister, Lily, who is becoming of age to where she can go out into society. And so her mother ships her and her Aunt Hetty off to London, where Frances is currently living. She's an American living in London, and her mother is kind of hoping that Frances will help Lily go into society and make a good impression, and maybe even come back possibly with a boyfriend at the very least. And so there's all of these things going on, and it's very chaotic. It's very crazy. But it's so far really cute. I mean, I'm only 36 pages into it. I'm liking it. I'm not finding anything that is super annoying. I will say I really do like Frances. I think she's very witty, and I do appreciate her candor that she has, because I think especially in this time frame it was very rare to find women who were a little more outspoken, and I think Frances is definitely that type. Now, I do think that the romance is going to involve the friend that is now her neighbor too. I don't know how that's going to go exactly. I am keen to see how it all plays out, though. I really think this is going to be something that I should finish the series of. I definitely will be able to get through the first book, but hopefully this will be the series that I actually finish for the first time in this. And whether or not I'm going to say it's going to be a really spectacular reading experience, I don't know. I don't think it's going to necessarily, but I think I'll at the very least be able to read through all these really quickly and at least enjoy the time that I got to experience something different. But I don't know if this would be something that I would be really interested in. So we'll see. We'll obviously delve back into this a little bit more later. I'm going to try to read some more of it tonight before I go to bed. Okay, I apologize with how I'm set up. If you watch my Wheel of D20 video, this is basically the same spot that I am doing this video for. So anyway, I'm cooking dinner right now. I've got noodles going for chicken noodle soup that I'm making for my husband because he's not feeling super well. But I did finish the entirety of A Lady's Guide to Etiquette and Murder, and I'm very excited to say that this has been a success. I really, really liked this one a lot. I ended up giving it a 4 out of 5 stars. It was super cozy. It was really fun. I like the romantic subplot that we're going to see develop over time. There is a mystery subplot of sorts that didn't necessarily get resolved in this one that I do think is going to play into at least another book in this series, which I'm very excited for. I really love when mystery books like this, they kind of have one of those lingering plots that has to kind of get further into the series before it finally gets solved or something happens, basically. Really enjoyed this a lot, and I'm so excited to say that this is, I think, going to be the first episode in the Finish Your DNF series where we are going to actually finish a series. And I'm so excited because, especially with how last month went, where I really didn't like the first book of the series I read, For a Darker Shade of Magic, this is like just a complete 180. I really love this a lot, and I'm very excited to see how the rest of the books go, especially because they're so short and they're just really fun and like I said, really cozy. Like, I'm actually kind of surprised that I enjoyed this as much as I did, because I'm not somebody that really likes historical fiction stuff too much, especially in the Victorian era. I sometimes have a hard time with cozy mysteries because they're almost a little bit too nice for me, but I did like this a lot because by the end of this, there were some stakes that were involved that I really appreciated that were brought into this. I will say that the way that I have my reading schedule set up for this month, I am not going to be getting to the next book here for probably a little bit. Probably in another week I will get to it, because I have a few other books I had meant to get through the rest of this month that are taking a little bit more priority. So I will be filming the next clip when I actually can get to the next book, and I think, if I remember correctly, the rest of the books I pretty much can read back to back to back to back. So I think when we get to that point, it should be probably like another week or so, and I should be able to get through those really quick. This off here right now, but I will speak to you guys again when I finally get started with book 2 and go from there. Hey guys, so it is about 9:30 at night on Monday, October 17th. It's been quite a few days since I last updated because I've been trying to get through a few other books before delving back into the Countess of Harleigh mysteries. I today, though, have gone through the entirety of the second book, which is A Lady's Guide to Gossip and Murder. Now, the reason I was able to get through this is because the audiobook is like 4.5 hours long, so I've basically listened to it most of this afternoon and evening, and they're really short, so it's super quick to fly through. But really enjoyed this one as well. I did give this another 4 stars. I think that that's going to be kind of the way that these are rated, if they're, rated at any point, because of the fact that I'm finding that I like the story and I love the mystery that's involved with it, and I really do like Frances as a main character. The main thing that I've so far found with both the first and the second book is the overall tying up of what the real culprit is behind some of the murders that are going on. So essentially what I found is that while we do ultimately find the culprit, the kind of way that it's brought up and like how everything ties together is really knotted, and it's not as clear to me as I would like. It's more of something where like there's so many factors that are played into with each of the mysteries that it is one person behind all of it, but like there's a lot of threads kind of from that one person that tie up with other people that cause different things to happen. And so sometimes some characters get a little confused in terms of like, I don't know exactly who is who. Ultimately, I understand who the culprit is at the end of it, but the logic and the building of the threads to that culprit can get a little confusing for me personally. Now, I think that overall the stories are great. The writing is wonderful. I actually don't mind the fact that it's historical fiction, and I don't really mind the romance that's going on with this, because like it's kind of got a different romantic aspect than I was thinking, because especially in this book, the man that is in love with Frances is displayed very early on in the first book, and he makes several proposals to her in the first and the second book. And she denies him every single time because she's kind of found that since her first husband's passing that she's kind of developed this taste for independence, I think. And so like there's a huge problem with giving up that independence, especially as a woman in the early 20th century where like men are the rulers of everything. You don't really have any say in terms of how you run things as a woman, not like it is today. And I think coupled with that, she just doesn't feel like she needs a man. Like she doesn't feel like she needs somebody to like take care of her. Like she's perfectly capable of taking care of herself. She's proven that to this gentleman many times, and I think in a lot of ways he respects her for that, which I really appreciate. I do like that the love interest is somebody that I can respect as a person. He very much respects her autonomy and the fact that she's going to do what she wants to do, which does put her in some danger in some cases by the ends of these books. She has put herself in situations where she could have been hurt, and the love interest takes real concern with the fact that she could be in danger, not just because of the fact that she's a woman, but because he genuinely cares about her and wants to protect her in the best way he can. And I just find it very sweet. This is actually a really sweet romance, but the romance is not like even a really big part of the story. Like, it is kind of a subplot, which again, I do appreciate, because I think at the heart of these, it is mysteries. It is a woman who gets herself somehow involved in these mysteries because either they have something to do with her or whatever the case may be. That being said, what is this one about? So, piggybacking off of what ends up happening at the end of A Lady's Guide to Etiquette and Murder, there is essentially this big event that happens. They call it the Glorious 12th. It happens on August 12th of every year, and it's a big, like, hunting thing where people go out to the country, they go get ready to do the hunting, at least the men do, and the women stay behind. And it turns out that during the events leading up to this, that one of Frances's friends gets murdered. It's a woman, and they start going through her things, and it turns out that this woman was either blackmailing a lot of people with secrets about things that were going on that she shouldn't have had any knowledge of, and or she basically was aware of things essentially that many people were not. Like, they're not sure if she was really blackmailing people or if she just knew a lot of these things and what the purpose of that would have been. And so they're digging more into her murder, and apparently there's another murder that also happens around the same time that there's a lot of questions, and this particular woman has a very kind of shady history. The further they delve into it, and the more that they start to kind of delve into what really happened to her, the more they realize that every single person that Frances knows has something to hide, and any one of them would kill to have that secret kept a secret. So Frances doesn't really know who to trust, and it's really difficult too, because during this time, her younger sister, who came to stay with her and be introduced to society in the first book, is now engaged, and they are trying to get an engagement party set up for her. And so she's having this hard time with dealing with the fact that, like, she wants to be involved in these cases and she wants to help and she wants to do all these things and feel involved and feel like she's a purpose in her life as an older, like, probably mid-30s woman, I would assume, or maybe even early 30s. And she's being torn in the direction of family duty and the things that she's expected of as a woman who's been married before, that has a younger sibling. Basically, she's had this expectation placed upon her where she has to be a up-and-coming woman in society that then teaches young girls about how to be in society and help them with matchmaking and all of these things in a lot of ways. And so there is this big dilemma that Frances has over the course of this book in particular of trying to balance that, but again, really feeling like she's found a purpose with doing these mysteries. It also kind of is something that ties her into the love interest that she's slowly developing feelings for, or I guess not so much slowly as it is maybe slowly accepting the feelings he has for her and accepting the fact that she may feel 100% the same way, but being very obstinate in admitting that, because it does, like I said, admit then to the fact that, she would have to be giving up her independence in some way that she really thought that she was enjoying since her first husband had passed away. And, it's kind of one of those things where, like, I think the further we go on, and maybe into the next book, we're going to see a lot of that get challenged, especially with the love interest thing. And then she is really hesitant to let her younger sister get married so quickly to somebody that she met, within the last few months, because Frances has her own issues with having been married so young, and you learn about that again over the course of this book. And even in the first book, we learn a lot about how Frances really regrets even marrying her first husband so young, and a lot of the problems that came around because of that, and is another reason why she's so afraid of getting married to this other person in the first place. So there's a lot of complexity with this, and As small as these books are, they do pack a pretty good punch. I'm actually really surprised that I'm enjoying these as much as I am, because I thought that with especially the brevity of these books, there wouldn't really be much that I could talk about, but this really has a lot of interesting layers to it that I think a lot of people would really like, especially if you're a cozy mystery fan. I'm going to say that by the second book, this is definitely a series I will be finishing. I would like to see the rest of this series go on, and I would like to see Frances and the love interest actually get together, because if I'm not mistaken, they're going to. It's going to have a happily ever after kind of thing for the two of them, so very excited for that, but definitely would recommend this series. I think it's very fun, and I think that even though the endings are not 100% like wrapped up nicely and clear, they're still enjoyable, and this is honestly one of my more favorite historical fictions, because I have a hard time with historical fiction half the time, and Jen made a real good recommendation. I don't know what it was about this that made them want to recommend this to me, but Jen, you did a good job. You did a really good job. So thank you very much for this recommendation. I am enjoying the crap out of these. So yeah, but I'm going to be starting up with book 3, which is A Lady's Guide to Mischief and Murder, here fairly soon, much sooner than, you know, the gap between the first book and the second book. But I do have one other book I want to read before I get to that, and I am still at this point in time during my reading of this month working through Words of Radiance. But once I get through this next book that is not Words of Radiance, I will basically be finishing out the series back to back to back. I'm going to head off right now, and I will speak to all you guys when I have got through Mischief and Murder. Good morning, everybody. It is going on 9 o'clock in the morning on Wednesday, and last night I did get through the entirety of the third book in the Countess of Harleigh mysteries, which is A Lady's Guide to Mischief and Murder. And I have to say, this is so far my favorite out of the series. I think that this is the best one so far, and I think that part of it is because I've gotten used to not only the writing style and the characters, but also the way that the story kind of develops. But honestly, I feel like I also just really liked the story going on in this one a lot more, and again, compared to how the other two books were, I did feel like I understood the main culprit of things a little better. Still not necessarily 100%, because there's some things that we learn about in terms of one of the characters and how they're connected to the culprit that I'm still a little unclear on, but it's kind of understandable because not everybody is really clear on it in the first place, so it makes sense why it's not necessarily clear to me. But this one did get a 5 out of 5 stars, and it's really fun because in this one we are following the characters as we are preparing for the upcoming nuptials of Frances's younger sister Lily, and there's some interesting things that happen at the very beginning of this, like the first chapter. The first of which is that Lily is found out to be pregnant, and that makes it very apparent that they have to get this wedding on the road, the show on the road real quick, because of the fact that if she starts showing, that's a bad thing, because keep in mind, back in the 1800s, being married out of wedlock was like a big no-no. So in order to protect the image of both Lily and her fiancé Leo, the family decides to quickly go ahead and do an elopement ceremony at this place called Risings, which is basically the home of George Hazelton and his sister. It's kind of like a country home that they had, at least his brother has of some kind. And essentially what we learn also is that Frances and George are basically engaged, but they're not officially like out to the family about it, because they're waiting for, one, about the fact that Lily's wedding is just about to happen. They don't want to steal her thunder, but two, they want to wait until like a lot of the family gets around. And one of the reasons also being that Lily and Frances's mother is coming from America to be at the wedding, and so that's a really big thing. Frances wants, her mother to be there to, approve of the marriage and all these things, and it proves very difficult to please the mother. You learn that Frances has spent most of her life trying to please her mother, and it's kind of something that gets really looked at in this one in particular in terms of the relationship and the problems within that she's developed growing up, which given the time period, makes sense because of the fact that I think that many times over the course of what I've heard of things that happened in the past is that it was very common for young women to want to please their mothers and do what their mothers tell them, those kinds of things. Whereas now it's more apparent that if you don't agree with what your mother says, like, that's fine. You can definitely go against her wishes. There may be some kind of strained relationship in some capacity, but ultimately the child is able to make their own decisions for the most part. So that's a very interesting kind of change that I've seen over the course of time. In addition to that, the main mystery that is going on is that there are multiple people within the wedding party and that are the guests for this wedding that are dropping either completely dead, staff are basically getting killed left, right, and center, and people are getting injured, if not completely dying themselves. And so George and Frances are trying to figure out what's really going on here. Who is the main target of all of this? There's thoughts that it might be Leo, who is Lily's fiance, that might be the target. Like, there might be somebody who's jealous of the fact that Leo is marrying Lily and wants him out of the picture. It's threatening the fact of the marriage even going through at all. And so George and Frances are trying to figure out what's going on before more people get hurt or killed, and keeping it as low-key as possible to avoid causing a panic, basically. But this was so much fun. I had a lot of fun reading this one because I think, again, I've gotten used to the way that Diane Freeman writes. I think this is so far the favorite, like I said, of the series. I think that ultimately the ending of this one, in terms of who the culprit is, and then also learning about certain ties that some characters have to that culprit, it was really interesting, and I think was a little bit more, like I said, clearer than the other two books I've read in this series so far, but very fun. I also love the fact that I feel that Frances has really grown a lot in this series. In this one in particular, we not only have her fighting against her mother, but then also coming to grips with the fact that the relationship she has with George is not the same as the one she had with her first husband. And, like, that's a really difficult thing for her to grasp, because if you've ever been in a situation where you left a very toxic relationship, whether it was physical abuse or whatever the case may be, going into a new relationship can sometimes be really hard for some people, and especially when they feel like everybody after that first relationship is out to get them, is out to hurt them in some capacity. It's no wonder why Frances was so hesitant at first to even admit feelings for George. You see a lot of that get brought up in the second book when she's even trying to figure out whether or not she wants to be involved with George, because he's proposed many times over the course of the first and the second book, and she was very hesitant to accept that proposal. And by the end of the second book, you saw that she was starting to come to grips with the fact that this man actually might be something worth, you know, bringing home to mom, basically. And then essentially in this one, it's not so much the fact that she's afraid that he's not the right one, but I think it's her inability to trust herself within this relationship and trust that she's making the right decision in some way. It's not like a huge part of it, but by the end of this one, you definitely feel that Frances is completely game for marrying George. She's 100%, you know, by the end of this, wanting to marry him and spend the rest of her life with him, which, by the way, I don't think I ever mentioned. I think I said something to the fact that Frances might be in like her late 20s, early 30s. It is said in this book that she is 28 currently. So she was about 27 over the course of books 1 and 2, and she just celebrated her 28th birthday not that long before the events of this one. So we have an age for her officially, but I really feel like this was the favorite so far. This is definitely my most favorite, and I definitely think that once I get through this series, I think I might want to get physical copies of this series, because I like it that much that I definitely feel like this would be something I would reread. So that's not very often that I find books like this, especially that I want to reread, but I'm very happy to say that that is the case with this series. So hey guys, so it is now going on, what time is it? It is 9:37 on Tuesday, October 25th, and I have not just finished book 4 of the Countess of Harleigh mysteries, but I've also finished book 5. I finished up book 4 here earlier today and then got through the entirety of book 5 right afterward. And I'm going to say off the bat, both of these ended up being 4 stars. I do think my most favorite book in this series is A Lady's Guide to Mischief and Murder, but I have thoroughly enjoyed this series, and I actually found out that A Bride's Guide to Marriage and Murder is a brand new release. Like, it came out in this year, and there's another book coming out in June of 2023. So I am very excited for that. I cannot wait. I think that Diane Freeman is going to be an author I'm going to keep my eye on. So thank you so much, Jen, for recommending this series to me. I have had a blast with it, and I hope that I can get my hands on the entire collection here very soon, at least before the release of the next book, because I would love to reread these. These are going to be a comfort reread for me, I think, because they're just so fun and really easy to fly through, and they actually are really good considering how small they are, but like the story is very well compact. So book 4, which is A Fiance's Guide to First Wives and Murder, we find out that there is a woman named Irina who comes to both George and Frances claiming to be George's actual current wife. And this is when George and Frances are engaged. They're getting ready to do an engagement party. And when Irina shows up, that kind of throws a lot of things into question. Irina also talks about how she is somehow the illegitimate child of a Russian couple who are royalty. They are part of the Russian royal family that were exiled. And she starts spinning these tales of things that nobody can really 100% figure out if it's true or not. And she says that she's been getting threatening letters from somebody telling her to stay out of London and to go back to France where she was living at the time. And when Frances and George start to figure out what exactly is going on with her and who might be after her, Irina then is found dead, strangled in the back garden of Frances's home. And so obviously there's a lot of controversy with the fact that there's a rumor spreading about the fact that this was supposedly George's first wife. So there's a lot of questioning of George and then of Frances herself. All the while, her mother is actually gone. Her mother has taken Frances's daughter off to France and thankfully is not involved in anything that's going on in this. But with the looming engagement party and her mother's eventual return, it puts Frances in a really weird spot, and it's, you know, a race against the clock, basically, of figuring out what happened to Irina, who was she really, and what exactly was going on, and who actually killed her, and what was the reason for that. I'm gonna say right off the bat, the first like 5 or 6 chapters of this definitely felt like I had whiplash, and that was the full intention. Like, the full intention of the beginning of this was to make the reader feel like they were having whiplash, because Frances felt like she was having whiplash with all of the things that was going on, because it was very quick that Irina shows up and she's saying all these things, and then it turns out that there's more to the story. Like, it seriously felt like those kinds of gifs or whatever where you're watching people watch the tennis match go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. Like, that is how this felt in the very beginning of it, and it was a little disorienting, but that was, again, the intent, because it was supposed to be confusing and make it so that you as the reader were way off center. You had no idea what to expect and what was going on, but the overall ending of the story was actually really interesting. I still feel like, though, that this one I didn't quite understand all of the complexities within this. We do find out who did kill Irina, and it is a bit of a shock in the sense that it is somebody that we've known about kind of throughout most of the story, but the reason as to why it happens is a little fuzzy for me still. I still don't feel like I got 100% the idea of what was going on here, but still was really enjoyable, and I definitely felt like this was the most crazy of the entire series so far. Like, I thought the last book was beyond nuts, but this was like taking the cake. Like, this is so far the craziest case that there has been in this entire series, and I absolutely loved it. Now, going into book 5, again, another 4-star read. This is basically the wedding of George and Frances. We see them get married in this, and there is this looming idea in the very beginning where there are these two families who have been feuding. They're both from America, or at least one is from America, one might be more British, I don't quite know, but either way, there's a feud that goes on, and Frances invites one set to her wedding because her brother Alonso is looking to court the daughter of that family, and her mother decides to invite the other side because she's friends with the other side of this feud. And essentially what we find out is during the course of the reception, one of the men in the family that Frances is friends with, because she's friends with the mother and the daughter, and Alonso, Frances's brother, is trying to date the daughter, the patriarch of the family is found dead, and they have no idea what happened. Nobody knows what's going on. The only thing that they know is that Alonso was found at the crime scene with the murder weapon, and so it is an entire story of George and Frances trying to not only clear Alonso's name, but really get to the root of what is going on in this feud, who would have really had the motive to kill this man. And I'm gonna say this does get into some of the most heavy topics. This actually touches a little bit on domestic violence in some cases, and I think that that was a really, really poignant thing to mention in this one. I do think that this was the most real in terms of the stories that were brought up in the Countess of Harleigh mystery so far, because there's an element that we don't really talk about when it comes to relationships and marriages of the past. And there's this idea that, like, in marriages sometimes there is abuse that kind of gets thrown under the rug, and I appreciate that Diane took the time to be a little delicate with that and be kind of like aware that this was something that was very likely, but not making it a romanticized thing, nor was it really like something that was sought after. It was something that was really devastating when you found out who was involved in that and what exactly was going on. Again, don't really feel like I quite understand all of the wrap up with this, like who really killed him. I do kind of have a general understanding of this one more so than I did of book 4 and maybe 2 and 1, but still wasn't quite as cleanly wrapped up as I think book 3 was, which was why book 3 was one of my most favorites of the series. But again, was still super enjoyable. Like, this entire series is 4 stars and up, which is really good. And again, I think that these books are just so fun to read that I think if you're looking for just a really quick, cozy mystery story, this is the one to go for, because it's fun. It doesn't have that nasty misogynistic aspect about it throughout the entirety of it that most stories placed in the 19th century do. Like, this is a very refreshing historical fiction story that allows a female character to actually have agency and do what she wants and be respected for that. So really love this series. I think that this is my most successful Finish Your DNF series of all time. I'm so excited about that. But with that being said, that is the end of this Finish or DNF episode of the Countess of Harleigh mysteries as it is right now. Like I said, there is a 6th book coming out in 2023, but I am happy to say that this is, again, the most successful episode I've ever had, because I did finish the entire series, and I managed to finish it in an entire month, and I absolutely loved it. So I think that when it comes to historical fiction, if I'm reading books that are kind of more in this vein, I will have a better time with it. If you have suggestions for series or even standalones that are in this same vein, where they're kind of a cozy mystery, have historical fiction elements, or are placed in past times or whatever, as long as they don't have like heavy misogynistic ideas in them, I think that those would be things I'd be interested in. So please let me know what you think down in the comments below. Thank you so much again to Jen from Genderqueer for recommending this series. This is amazing. I'm so glad that I got to enjoy this series. And again, I would love to have these as my own physical copies, so I'm going to have to sadly return all of these to the library, but I will hopefully soon get all of these books and then be prepared for book number 6 to come out in June. So thank you guys so much for joining me in this video. If you guys did enjoy it, please do give it a big thumbs up. And if you haven't already and you'd like to be and would like to see more content like this, go ahead and hit that button down below and subscribe to become an owlet in our flock. And I will see all of you guys in my next video. Bye guys!